Alistair Wilson was born in Beef, near Ayrshire on Scotland's west coast on the 4th of March 1974, the second child of Alan and Joan Wilson. He attended Beef Primary School and Garnock Academy in the local area, and was known locally as a hard-working and ambitious young adult. He later attended the University of Stirling to study for a degree in accountancy and business law. After graduating, Alistair then started work as a graduate at the Bank of Scotland's Fort William branch. This venture marked the beginning of Alistair's life in the untamed beauty of the Scottish Highlands. Early on in his tenure at the bank, Alistair met Veronica, a native of Fort William. He knew he had met his soulmate. Within 6 weeks, he had proposed and she said yes. They married in 1998. Alistair briefly worked in Bank of Scotland's headquarters in Edinburgh before taking a job at the Inverness branch in late 1999. In 2000, the couple welcomed their first child into the world, and their second child followed in 2002. Soon after, the family moved into their dream house at 10 Crescent Road, a small privately set street in the seaside town of Nairn. With Romeo and Juliet balconies, wrought iron balustrades, a well-manicured lawn and large bay windows, the house was a statement of the Wilsons' joint commitment to a burgeoning and growing family. With all the free space, it made sense that Veronica's dad, Ronnie, moved in to occupy the upstairs room of the house. The new arrangement kept the tight-knit Wilson family all within one space. The house lay opposite the Havelock House Hotel and Pub, and a mere 100 yards from the local police station. With Veronica as the doting mother and Alistair both a hard-working provider and hands-on father, life was good in the coastal town. At around 7:15 PM on the 28th of November 2004, the doorbell of the Wilsons' house rang out. Having lived in the town for 2 years and bearing a good reputation, the family were a welcome and respected pillar in the community. One of the Wilsons' friends in the area had entrusted them with looking after their 18-month-old child that night, as they had plans which were to run late into the evening. Veronica assumed that they had returned early and descended the stairs to open the door and greet them. When Veronica opened the door, she was met not by the sight of her friends, but that of a man. The man stood clean-shaven, aged between 35 and 40 years old, and was of average height and stocky build. He wore a dark baseball cap and a Harrington-style jacket. Addressing Veronica, he said only 2 words: "Alistair Wilson." Despite the abruptness of this statement, Veronica remained unfazed. It was likely she thought to be one of Alistair's banking associates who could be known for their directness. Alistair, who had been upstairs reading the children a bedtime story, headed downstairs. Veronica took over the familial duties, reading the children their story and playing games with them as they settled. Veronica could hear Alistair and the man chatting in muted tones, but nothing in the muffled hubbub had given her any cause for alarm. After a few minutes, Alistair reappeared at his wife's side, with his hands engulfing a turquoise envelope. Alistair seemed somewhat surprised by whatever encounter had taken place downstairs. He turned to Veronica and bemusedly noted he had no idea who the man at the door was. He noted he had been given an envelope and afterwards closed the door on the man and returned to the house. As he turned the envelope around in his hands, Veronica noticed the name Paul written on the front. She pointed this out to Alistair, who seemed indifferent, perhaps confused, but not scared. At this, he queried Veronica as to whether the man had intended to deliver this envelope to him. Veronica reminded Alistair he had been asked for by name. Veronica and Alistair both agreed it was strange, but neither felt anything more sinister at play. After a few silent moments had passed, Alistair told Veronica that he was going to pop out of the house to ensure the unexpected visitor had left their property. Veronica implored him to leave it and put the boys to bed. Alistair was already descending the steps to the front door of Crescent Road as she said it. Upon Alistair going back outside, a commotion began to take place. 3 distinct bangs cut through the cool air of the Nairn evening. Bang! 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 I'm JS, and this is Skinwalker. The small coastal town of Nairn, located around 17 miles outside of the city of Inverness in the Scottish Highlands, is a peaceful, idyllic place. Boasting a population of approximately 10,000 people, it is the sort of place where serious crime is infrequent, and you can live as in or out of the public eye as you wish. Nairn has always been a particular haunt for the well-off of Britain, looking to escape the grime of the cities, with its expanses of golden beaches, world-class golfing destinations, and a temperate climate for the Scottish Highlands. It has had only 2 real criminal incidents of note in the 20th century. The first, the arrest of 2 German spies during World War II caught in the village attempting to board a train for Inverness. They had been dropped by U-boat into the body of water surrounding the area. The other, a murder which took place after a drunken argument at one of the town's many weddings in the 1990s. With celebrity fans across the decades such as Charlie Chaplin and Tilda Swinton, the beauty of the area, if a little faded now, still speaks for itself. The Wilson family were drawn to Nairn as a result of staying in Inverness during Alistair's tenure at the Bank of Scotland. Spending weekends as a family on the beach, they felt it was a very suitable place to grow. When they initially purchased the house at Crescent Road, the family had pictured that they would be able to run a successful B&B from the location. A B&B is a small room hotel which provides a bed and breakfast. They typically host up to 8 people overnight as they pass through the area. However, around 9 months into the venture, the business began to fail. At this point, the family cut their losses and turned the building into a large family home and moved Ronnie in. At this stage in their lives, Alistair felt he needed a new challenge. Alistair had always been an ambitious man, looking to improve the lives of himself and his family around him at every juncture. Having worked his entire adult life at the Bank of Scotland, Alistair was in the process of seeking out a new challenge. Alistair had taken up the offer of a bespoke role at the building research establishment. He was serving his notice period in the time running up to the 28th of November 2004. Alistair had made no intimation that things were going awry at the bank. He wanted to try something new and work somewhere different, where he felt he could progress further. Given their happy personal circumstances and professional contentment, Veronica felt little cause for concern as her husband descended the stairs to the front door of Crescent Road. Even as the bangs in the street rang out, Veronica thought perhaps some pallets stored on the street had been toppled over. Her husband Alistair knew otherwise. The unknown man at the door had fired 3 bullets into Alistair from point blank range, 2 to the head and 1 centre mass. A gangland execution in Nairn. Veronica, nonetheless, alerted to the noise, raced to the door, where she met with the sight of her husband fading in a pool of his own blood. Unbelievably, Alistair was still alive, albeit deteriorating quickly. The nameless figure that had plagued the Wilsons' doorstep was callously walking away from the scene towards the main road. Veronica's mind, however, was not on the escape of the executioner. Veronica was in an anguished race to save her husband's life. Blood-soaked and desperate, Veronica called 999, the emergency number in Scotland. While still on the phone, she ran in through the door of the Havelock House Hotel. Seeing no one she knew or trusted and in a state of intense alarm, she ran back outside to her ailing husband. With Alistair worsening by the second, Veronica re-emerged inside the Havelock, begging and pleading for revellers to come to Alistair's aid. Tina Thompson, a local nurse, was administering CPR, frantically trying to keep Alistair breathing and his heart beating. It was in vain. As one of the people within the cordon said afterwards, "What do you do for a man who's been shot in the head?" As Alistair Wilson drew his last breath, an entire community was left in a fractured reality. Their belief in their local community and its safety a forgotten ideal. Moreover, the killer had walked off from the scene with what seemed like not a care in the world. The police descended on the scene and in time Nairn itself, combing beaches, interviewing, knocking on doors, and looking for the suspicious to reveal itself. There should have been a home run within the case. The local council had recently tendered out the refurbishment and maintenance of local CCTV. One of the town's cameras aimed directly down Crescent Road, hung from the tower of a local church which stood nearby. Unbelievably, that specific node of the system was down on the night Alistair was murdered. There was no CCTV for the police to work with. There was also no sign of the blue envelope which the killer had given to Alistair. Veronica was certain she had seen Alistair descend the stairs with the envelope in hand. It wasn't in the Wilsons' house, and the police cordon and search should have prevented it from being lost or stolen from near the crime scene. It stood to reason that the killer must have held his cool long enough to remove it from Alistair after he had shot him. The crime scene itself, however, was poorly managed. The first responders from the police were inexperienced in a case of this severity. They were more used to vandalism and petty drug dealing than murder. The destruction or loss of evidence within the cordon would have been a massive blow for the case, and one which couldn't be ruled out given the circumstances. Andy Burnett, the proprietor of the Havelock, mentioned in an interview years later that he had actually been allowed inside the police cordon, and he had even touched Alistair Wilson as he lay dying. The case seemed bleak and helpless. Without a motive and censor evidence, police were losing ground fast. This stasis changed 10 days after the event. Andy McMahon, a local tradesperson, was unblocking a drain on Seabank Road in Nairn, a mere half-mile from the Wilsons' home. As he was finishing his duties for the day, something made him stop and look. A glint on metal had piqued his curiosity. He thought deep within the drain he could make out the outline of a gun. Believing it to be a dummy due to the innocuous look and size of the weapon, Andy nonetheless dropped to his knees and began fishing within the drain. Feeling the weight of the weapon, Andy realised that this was no toy gun. This was a real and dangerous weapon. The wider group of workers which Andy was a part of phoned to alert the police. The police attended the scene and removed the gun for testing. Forensic analysis on the weaponry informed both the police and the Wilsons that this small handgun was the weapon which ended Alistair's life. The two critical pieces of evidence which the police were left with were the envelope and the gun. The envelope was a turquoise blue on good quality paper and was described by Veronica as being something like what you would use to send a birthday card. Veronica had a keen look at the outer cover of the envelope while Alistair had joined her in the room after meeting with the stranger outside. The main surprise with the envelope was its contents. There were none. Veronica had noted the name Paul scribbled across the front of the envelope. When she pressed Alistair on the subject, he claimed not to know the matter and asked if Veronica was sure the man had come to the correct door. Veronica reminded him at the time the man had asked for him by name. Why go to all the trouble of creating such a show at the door, only to say very little and hand over an empty envelope which baffled the recipient? Veronica was interviewed numerous times on this matter and gave convincing answers as to her belief that Alistair was not aware of any subtle or implied meaning. The only people who knew what the envelope meant is the gunman at the door, whoever was behind the killing, and, depending on his ability to deceive his wife, Alistair Wilson. Doorstep executions are not unheard of in the UK. Jill Dando is perhaps the most famous of these. Some of these executions may have even included instructions delivered in or on envelopes. Envelopes can also be used to distract a target's attention as they were executed. However, this was Nairn on the northern Scottish coast. Besides that, Alistair's envelope was empty. The pawl on the front of the envelope gives rise to interesting considerations in this respect. Was Paul a name to which Alistair should attach some relevance? Was it an acronym? Some speculated it might have been a gangland figure or a shorthand term for a project Alistair was advising on. Whatever else Paul may have been, it was intended as a stark 4-letter warning to Alistair Wilson. The other fact of interest was the murder weapon found by Andy McMahon on Seabank Road. The gun which was used was a Hennel Schmeisser 6.35mm, a strikingly small weapon. The Schmeisser was manufactured by the C.G. Hennel Company in Germany for only a short period between the 20s and 30s. The weapon fired incredibly small .25mm calibre ammunition. Ammunition of this calibre lacked power and was not a guaranteed kill, except when fired at point blank range. Even worse for an anonymous gunman, it automatically dispensed shot bullet casings onto the ground, creating additional forensics. Given this, the Hennel Schmeisser was not a typical murder weapon. Even more unusual was that it turned up in Scotland of all places. A rare wartime gun, its use in the slaying had to be either seen as symbolic or a matter of necessity. Concealed guns can draw attention. Guns more generally were difficult to obtain in Scotland after the development of anti-handgun legislation in the wake of the Dunblane massacre in 1996. One theory lies in the fact that the locals held guns as relics or trophies from the Second World War. Perhaps the gunman had deemed it safer to travel without a weapon. This would leave him or his employer with the task of acquiring one in the local area. In such a small coastal town, the gunman may have elected to take whatever a local contact was able to procure from their own home. Better that than to risk being stopped with a gun in their vehicle. The lower the risk of raising suspicions, the higher the potential for the gunman's success. The Hennel Schmeisser was also small enough that it could have come on the journey with the gunman, but would not produce a bulge while being concealed due to its small size. Nonetheless, if the killer was so averse to attention and scrutiny before the attack, it stands in stark contrast to his unconcerned nature lingering in the doorway of 10 Crescent Road in the period between Alistair's first and second visit. The dumping of the weapon in a drain on Seabank Road raised issues for the investigation too. The police had mentioned they were going to comb every alley, every bin and every drain in the area to look for evidence and forensics. Given that Seabank Road lay only a half mile from the Wilsons' home, this raised questions about the radius of the police search. Further to that, locals questioned whether the police's inability to find the gun quickly had led to a destruction of vital forensics which may have provided a lead for the case. Equally strange is the frequency with which these minute pistols have turned up in Nairn. There have been 3 found since 2004, with only 13 in total turning up across the UK. One of these was the murder weapon on Seabank Road. Another was an identical model to the one used in the murder of Alistair Wilson, which was handed in following a house clearance in August 2016. The other abandoned in Nairn. They are not conventional guns, even in their country of manufacture, which begs the question, how did so many get into Nairn? Due to the manner in which Alistair was executed, and the cold, composed nature of the killer after the event, most people involved believe that the murder of Alistair Wilson was a contract killing. For Veronica, some questions remain. Her husband, as far as she was aware, could not have been further from a way of life which could get someone murdered. Secondly, if the intention was to kill her husband, why let Alistair come back into the safety of the house with the door shut behind him? The easiest option for a hitman would have been to put the self-same 3 bullets in Alistair when he appeared at the door. Contract killers look to reduce risk at every turn. They do not typically use highly unusual weapons with low calibre bullets and allow the spouse of their intended victim to look them in the face before the killing. Veronica is convinced that Alistair never believed his life was in danger, or he would have taken action when he had returned to the house. There was, in her eyes, nothing in his body language to indicate he was hiding something. The location and timing is striking too. The Wilsons' 2 children, as well as a neighbour's toddler, were in the house and Veronica's father Ronnie was upstairs. The street itself lay quiet at that hour, but not unpopulated. Revellers came in and out of the Havelock House pub across the road, smoking cigarettes or heading home. It was an incredible risk to remain in the doorway as long as the killer did, before ultimately deciding to kill Alistair. The killer even spoke to Veronica and let her look at his characteristics and some of his face. Veronica got a clear enough look that despite the fleeting nature of their conversation, she was still able to supply details as to what he was wearing and his stature. No e-fit has ever been produced based on Veronica's description of the killer. The police then received a phone call in the days following the incident from a local man who had been on a bus which passed through Nairn in the time immediately before the slaying of Alistair. He described seeing a man on the same public bus he was riding who matched the description given by Veronica. The man had been acting in an agitated manner, seeming ill at ease during his journey. The police interviewed the local man and drew up an e-fit based on the description he had given. The man declared it a good likeness. Was this the man who had so callously ended Alistair Wilson's life just yards away from his wife and children? We'll never know. The local police decided against circulating the image in the aftermath, stating they were satisfied they had ruled out the man in question. Veronica has never publicly acknowledged having seen the e-fit or ruling out the man in question. One of the initial suspects was Andy Burnett, the proprietor of the Havelock House Hotel and Bar. Andy had only recently moved to Nairn in early 2004. He previously lived in Guernsey, but had purchased the Havelock as a means to return to the UK mainland. Upon taking the property, Andy had constructed a large decking area within his property's car park to allow his clientele to eat and drink al fresco. Andy had failed to seek out planning permission for these works and had sought a retroactive permit for the works, which had already been carried out. Alistair Wilson had taken exception to Andy's building works, writing to the local council to block the application and sought the removal of the decked area from the Havelock. The police interviewed Andy Burnett vigorously after Alistair's murder, but he was never charged. The spat over planning permission was deemed by the police to be just that. As the shortlist of leads ran out and the case failed to deliver, the public began to eye Veronica more and more suspiciously. Alistair's murder and the mystery gunman was a case founded upon a single account. The only other person who had been involved lay cold in the morgue. Studies were in vogue at the time which stated that women who kill were vastly more likely to kill their partner, spouse or family member than a stranger in the street. People speculated that Veronica had hired a hitman, ensuring she would receive her husband's money. People speculated that it was an affair gone wrong. Andy Burnett also raised questions over the volume of people in Crescent Road at the time of the attack, yet no one other than Veronica had ever seen a gunman. Many spoke, but few knew the facts. In the year after the events of the 28th of November, the then Northern Constabulary made 2 key statements regarding the 2 prevalent rumours. They exculpated Veronica, stating they had investigated her and her family's circumstances, and nothing gave them cause for alarm. Furthermore, Veronica did not stand to inherit much in the event of Alistair's death. There was no exceptional life insurance. There was only the half share in the house she already resided in at Crescent Road, about £10,000 in cash, bonuses and bonds, and some various personal effects. Veronica has assisted the police investigation at every juncture. In the aftermath of the killing, Veronica even underwent regressive hypnotherapy to try and remember further details to assist the police investigation. Veronica further relented on her self-enforced exile from the public eye to take part in Fiona Walker's investigation into the case for BBC Scotland in 2018. During the course of the Doorstep Murder podcast series, Veronica gave an all-encompassing interview concerning the case, where she stated again for the record her sheer heartbreak and confusion over the events of that day. As of today, the pursuit of Alistair Wilson's killer has gone almost entirely cold from an official perspective. At the 10th anniversary of the case, a review of the Alistair Wilson investigation was commissioned. Gary Flanagan, Detective Chief Superintendent of the Special Crime Division, was appointed to lead the review. Little was found to supplement the initial inquiry. Police officers are still assigned to the case, hunting the needle in the haystack. Police Scotland have publicly stated they cannot fathom a motive for the slaying of Alistair Wilson, and claim to have investigated each of the currently propagated theories. Extensive inquiries into Alistair's murder have been carried out, with nearly 14,000 people spoken to, 3,500 statements taken, and door-to-door inquiries at more than 1,000 addresses in Nairn. Despite the lack of motive, one local noted in the aftermath, "It's hard to fathom why, but things like this don't happen for no reason." One motive may lie in the so-called Loyalist connection. John Beattie is a former Scottish rugby union player at international level who now hosts a call-in radio show in Scotland. During one radio phone-in session, a phone call was taken by John's producer. A man had left his phone number and claimed he knew the circumstances around the death of Alistair Wilson. Off-air, John made a call to the man he has since dubbed Peter. John was not made aware of Peter's actual name. During the phone call, John was given names, motives and details of the police officers who were aware of the exact circumstances. Peter made it clear throughout that this was second-hand information, which had come from his friend, and that he was frightened for his life. Peter claimed that Alistair Wilson was executed as a result of his ties to one or possibly two Highland businessmen with links to Northern Irish paramilitaries on the Loyalist side. During an altercation with another contact, the same Highland businessman told the party that should he ever renege on business with the paramilitary and himself, they would do to him what they did to Alistair Wilson. The hair on the back of John's neck stood up. It wasn't the content of the story which had him hooked. The story had all the hallmarks of a gangland execution. It could have been anything from hoax to reality. However, the sheer terror in his voice convinced John that Peter was telling him the truth. They built up a rapport over the following months. After a period, John introduced Peter to Fiona Walker. Fiona Walker is a Scottish investigative journalist. Fiona brought the Alistair Wilson murder back into the popular media as part of her podcast series on the case, The Doorstep Murder, for the BBC in 2018. Fiona brought her questions to Peter and listened to what he had to say. Peter informed Fiona that this information had been anonymously provided to the police, quote, years ago, but that they had failed to follow this up. Due to the passage of time since the report, one of the key figures in the plot had since died, unable to face charges or trial. As Fiona researched the case, some of the facts stood up to scrutiny, while others did not. This was not a hole in the theory, as by Peter's admission, he was not the man with the answers. He was simply a terrified associate of someone who was in the inner sanctum and had confided in him. One of the other leading theories comes from Peter Blexley. Blexley is a former undercover Met Police investigator. When Peter heard of the Alistair Wilson case several years after the event, he set off to Scotland to do his own investigation. Peter said that given Alistair's job, to get to the bottom of this, we have to follow the money. Alistair's role within the bank was to source small to medium enterprises in the region, convert them to banking with the Bank of Scotland, and foster a long-term stable relationship between the organisation and the bank. Given his relative free rein, this freedom had the potential to get Alistair in trouble. As a result, Peter Blexley looked into some lending patterns throughout Alistair's career and associates he had amassed at his time within the bank. Alistair was able, without oversight, to offer up to £100,000 in lending to his associated businesses whilst in his position at the Inverness branch. Blexley believed whilst investigating these figures, he had identified a pattern of off-the-books banking services which could have potentially been involved in money laundering. In 2009, while standing at the urinal of a Nairn pub toilet, Peter stated that he was instructed by a local man, "Do not turn around. It was an in-house job. We couldn't prove it." He was told not to turn around for 1 minute whilst the man made his exit. Peter was certain the man who had made the statement was a member of the police's investigation team. Some of the facts behind Alistair's life drew considerable questions in this respect also. The house at Crescent Road was incredibly large. The maintenance and ongoing management costs of the property would be similarly high. Alistair's salary would have been seen as good money for the area, but whether it would have covered the upkeep of a commercial property being used as a domestic dwelling and the other expenses of the family remained up for debate. Alistair also had a lavish lifestyle, attending functions and events regularly, wearing expensive clothing. In the weeks preceding his death, Alistair had spoken with a friend who was a property surveyor, looking to have Crescent Road valued, intending to sell the property in the near future. Furthermore, with these money considerations this tight, Alistair hadn't claimed expenses he had incurred in the previous 3 months of his employment. The figures for the expenses could be relatively large, given that Alistair was entertaining potential clients of the bank regularly. All of this served to fuel Peter's fire that he was onto something. One particular angle he noticed was that of Alistair's lending to Livingston FC. Livingston is an association football team who had debts called in by the Bank of Scotland, which resulted in their administration in 2004. Livingston had a somewhat meteoric rise on the pitch in the late 1990s into the 2000s, and an equally sudden fall in their financials during the same period. Running out of assets, they were saved by a consortium who bought out the owners and staved off the bank's administrators in May 2004. However, Blexley believes that the former owners were not fond of having their fingers burned. The gunman was sent to Alistair's door to scare him, allegedly, but it went wrong and he was shot dead. According to Blexley, the identity and motive behind the slaying is common knowledge amongst the legal profession in Scotland. However, as they don't want a shooter at their door, they too keep quiet. Blexley has also noted his belief that the gunman had a getaway driver on standby, given the gun was dropped into a drain on Seabank Road on the passenger side of a vehicle being driven on the left side of the road, as is standard in the UK. Blexley believes that slowing the car to a crawl, opening the door on the passenger side and dropping the gun presents a significantly more feasible and lower risk method of disposal than walking to Seabank Road from Crescent Road. Similarly, it is lower risk than parking the car and walking around to the drain if the gunman were his own getaway driver. This means that there must be at least 3 people out there who have to remain quiet: the killer, the organiser and the getaway driver. 15 years later, they remain quiet. A final option for the case is that there was no motive, that this was merely a horrendous case of either mistaken identity or a planned killing with coincidental red herrings to throw the police off the scent. Veronica Wilson has publicly stated her belief that the murder of her husband must have been a case of mistaken identity. Given the killer asked for Alistair by name, it stands to reason if this were the case, it must have been another Alistair Wilson he looked to slay. There is one other Alistair Wilson currently living in Nairn. He privately distanced himself from investigations and is not a person of interest in any ongoing investigation. He has since died of alcoholism and his side of the story will never be told. The only remaining alternative is that Alistair was killed in a murder with a nonsensical plot wrapped around it, built by chance to deceive the reader and confound police. This could be from a personal grudge, a killer with serious mental health issues, or simply a somewhat random act of violence. If so, the killing of Alistair Wilson would stand as one of the most unusual red herring murder cases of all time. There is an element of doubt cast on the deranged killer hypothesis by Professor Wilson, a criminologist at Birmingham City University, who noted during a conversation with Peter Blexley that the level of organisation and lack of a suspect were not indicative of this kind of killer. Whatever the truth of the matter, a loyalist paramilitary, a gangland figure associated with a failing football club, or Alistair simply the victim of a senseless crime with grandiose red herrings, today the story of Alistair Wilson remains as much of a why-done-it as a who-done-it. As of today, no one has ever stood charged with the murder of Alistair. One day that may change. To quote DS Gary Cunningham, "The passage of time can lead to significant changes in people's associations. Those who may have been reluctant to come forward with information years ago, for whatever reason, may be more willing to do so now. Someone out there knows why Alistair was killed and who was involved in his murder, and I would appeal to them to come forward.